As Jamie was reading that, I read it, of course, because I cut and pasted it into the script. But I was thinking about our coming of age youth who are doing the coming of age program. And at the end of that, they'll hold a service where they will share their statements of faith. I don't know, did you get to do that when you were? Oh, that's awful. Anyway, one thing that I love about the coming of age service and coming up with these statements is literally when that service begins, it's like, this is what we believe today, right now, and that can change in a moment. And I think that that's what this idea of evolution holds. So I'm in this new habit now of creating a video a week. It's a good learning edge for me, a little bit of a stretch. And the one I recorded for this Thursday's email, I quoted Clinton Lee Scott, who was a signer of the first Humanist Manifesto in 1933. And he said that the known is not enough. We are drawn to all we do not know. We are infinitely curious, and curiosity moves to a commitment to a forward-looking religion. Everything is in process. Nothing is complete. That concept of everything is in process and nothing is complete, that's really what this today's sermon is about. This is the start of the month of November, and our worship theme is change. And so I thought I'd dive into a saying that you may hear some folks use when they describe Unitarian Universalism. The saying is, revelation is not sealed. Honestly, I was raised as a not very frequent Catholic, and we moved a lot. We moved every 3 years. And though my parents were both raised Catholics, let's just say finding a local parish wasn't on the top of their list with every move. We were loosely affiliated with different parishes, but in each place I lived, but I honestly couldn't even tell you the name of one of them. That's how connected I was. They were kind of in that periphery area of my life. Religious language and ideas, they weren't part of my upbringing. I don't think I remember anybody in my family talking about Jesus except for when I went to a Catholic school in England and we had to draw all the Bible stories. My mom was really the only person who referred to God in terms of something that informed her life for the longest period of time. So this saying, revelation is sealed, it just had no point of context for me or relevancy. Wow, I woke up at 5 a.m. I imagine many of you did too, so my brain's a little dimmer than usual. But as an enthusiastic Unitarian Universalist long before I became a minister, I was a student of this faith, and I've always enjoyed absorbing evolving religious ideas and learning about our theological roots and kind of taking this contemporary application of our faith in my own life. Now, although the statement of revelation is not sealed, still probably doesn't resonate with most people I know, and I don't really run into it with things that I do. It's one of the phrases I love most about Unitarian Universalism. I would say that, let me see, you guys, this is bad because I am really tired. So I'm going to make this print a little bigger and that's going to help me tremendously. I would say this statement is what keeps us rooted in our history, but it's also a way that it informs who we are as a contemporary faith. So if you tie this statement of revelation not being sealed to the idea of our tradition, that's where we say we are a living tradition. That's what living tradition means. We are responsive to the time without losing a sense of who we are. There's always that thread to the past, one that's echoed through time up until today. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time with you today reflecting on that idea of revelation not being sealed, and then see how it fits with you and your theology and ethics and worldview. I think some of your stories today help inform that. I think a good place to begin is looking at faiths that believe in revelation, and whose views of revelation is sealed. So the simplest definition found in Wiktionary, I didn't even know Wiktionary existed, but it does, is that a revealed religion is the type of religion which relies on communication originating directly from a divine being. So as reported by the prophets and mystics and disciples, etc. To establish religious beliefs that are authoritative and acceptable. In A Brief Guide to Beliefs, Linda Edwards describes revealed religions as those that claim to have the origin in revelations. They were distinctive experiences of the holy coming into human life and experience. So revelation can take the form of visions. Think of Moses in the desert. Of inner voices, you can imagine Muhammad outside of Mecca, or in events such as the death and resurrection of Christ. Much that has been recorded in sacred text is positive for humankind. Like think of the 10 Commandments. That's one example of something that has come out of religious text that I think continues to inform our lives. Edwards also writes about faiths like Mormonism. It's just another one to think about, which is a faith that believes in continual revelation. So the successive presidents of the Mormon Church are the receivers of revelations. And for instance, in 1978, the president claimed a new revelation that admitted Blacks into priesthood. Judeo-Christian religions are based in revelation. In Christianity, Jesus as God incarnate is the primary messenger in the Bible. The Quran and the Tanakh in the Jewish tradition are also central, and they are the defining scriptures for their followers. This is true for many religions as well. Daley Koss refers to revealed religions as doctrinal religions, where the emphasis is on belief. In doctrinal religions, the supernatural forces, often called gods, give guidelines and rules and laws and rituals and other things that are to be followed by the community. As men began to document revelations and create sacred texts, this long oral tradition of storytelling that existed before they were documented, and this tradition of teaching changed. As religious scholar Karen Armstrong reflects, this switch from an oral tradition of religion to a written text was a shock. Religious truth sounded completely different when presented in this view. Everything was clear-cut and dried, which was very different from when this more elusive knowledge transferred by storytellers and imparted in this oral tradition. Early Unitarian and Universalists, as you know, were Christians, and they held the Bible as their central text. We come from a tradition, though, of people who were not afraid to counter the predominant beliefs of their time. That's why so many of our UU ancestors, and Michael Servetus included, were regarded as heretics. In contrast to revealed religions, terms like natural religion or rational religion have been used to describe Unitarian Universalist. As early as 1759, Unitarian Ebenezer Gay preached at Harvard University about the division between revealed and natural religion. He said that revealed religion is that which God hath made known to men by the immediate inspiration of the Spirit, the declarations of his mouth and the instructions of his prophets. Natural, that which bears reason, discovers, and dictates. So he saw this kind of middle way where you could have revealed religion and you could have natural religion. They could coexist. He said that revealed religion is an addition to natural, built not on the ruins, but on the strong and everlasting foundations of it. So our history also, as you know, includes transcendentalists of the late 1800s, and they were leaning into this idea of revelation as direct experience, experienced in an individual's life and outside of a traditional church setting. In 1841, in this passage from Ralph Waldo Emerson's book, The Oversoul, he says, "Let us learn that the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us, that the sources of nature are in our own minds. As there's no screening or ceilings between our heads and the infinite heaven, so there is no bar or wall in the soul where we, the effect, cease, and God, the cause, begins." So we and God are just all intermingling. He says, "I'm constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events that I will call mine. And there's a deep power in which we must exist and those in whose beatitude is accessible to us. The soul's health consists in the fullness of reception. Forever and ever, he says, the influx of this better and more universal self is new and unsearchable. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the internal one. It's interesting to hear his language. He's clearly using kind of both the source of God and the source of experience. In the 1900s, this idea of biblical authority above all else was mostly abandoned by Unitarian and Universalist. It's said that within Unitarian and Universalism, the existence of God was actually being debated quite heavily in the 1920s to the 1930s. The Humanist Manifesto, which we read a little bit about, was published in 1933, and it was followed with a big rise of humanism. First Unitarian Society, where Jamie and Roger got married and where we came out of, was one of the most renowned congregations in the humanist movement. Curtis Reese, in his book, The Meaning of Humanism, published in 1931, articulates what humanists were thinking at that time. He wrote, the trend in modern religious developments is away from the transcendent, the authoritative, the dogmatic, and towards the human, the experimental, the tentative, away from the abnormal, the formal, the ritualistic, and towards the normal, the informal, the usual, away from the extraordinary mystic expression, the exalted mood, the otherworldly, and toward the ethical, the social, and the worldly, away from freedom, from religion conceived as one man's concern, and towards a religion conceived as man's one concern. So Reese challenged this idea of revelation as a source for truth, for he believed that supernatural revelation is itself a product of human mind. I'm sure many of you here today understand that thought. Basically, he's saying that if humans are the ones who record revelations, then their own subjectivity influences what gets recorded. He rejected the supernatural as a source of truth. He trusted evidence, and evidence in his and many other religious liberals says that the supernatural does not exist. No area of belief in his mind stands outside of that basic kind of evidential, that he needs evidence requirement. So our own UU Tapestry of Faith, which is a curriculum online, lifts up a more contemporary theologian, which is James Luther Adams. In his 1978 publication on Being Human Religiously, he says, he talks about like 5 smooth stones of liberal religion. I'm not going to talk about all 5. That could be 5 sermons, which could be sort of fun. He talks about the first of them is that religious liberalism depends on the principle that revelation is continuous. So this could also be said that our religious tradition is a living tradition because we are always learning new truths. And that's the truth with a little t, not like a big T truth. So I want to be clear that there's no need to take this idea of revelation and religious truths and spiritual exploration and assume that you need to make it an either or decision between sacred text and science and experience. The book, A House for Hope, A Promise for Progressive Religion in the 21st Century, John Burns and Rebecca Parker, they wrestle with this challenge of the talk of God and how religious liberals often see it as something that's used to control people. They write that God talk has been used as a hammer to home expectations of obedience, to censor feelings and passions. It's been invoked to stifle human inquiry and to reinforce oppression. For many people, they say, the word God stands for concepts of the ultimate that have harmed life, sanctioned unjust systems, or propelled people to take horrific actions. We see that now in the name of God. This is not unfamiliar to us. They reflect, though, on early Unitarians who believed in a loving God. Take, for instance, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She says that she embraced the new theology, which placed ideas of God on a new foundation. Rather than submitting to this established doctrine, human beings could come to know God from observation of the world and contemplation of human experience. As I was reading about this idea of co-creating with God, I remembered the slogan of our Christian siblings, I could say, the UCCs. I don't know if they still have it, but remember when they used to have those signs out saying, God is still speaking. That was their idea of a continual revelation, that it's not, you don't have to just look to the past. You can look at how God is commingling in life. So continuing revelation can come from many sources. And for theists, they come from this idea of a God who is still active and alive in their lives in the world. So I'm going to move from history, because I know that was a lot. I don't usually quote that much, but it's theology from the past. I'm going to move from that and just talk a little bit about what this means for us. We turn to many sources of wisdom for wisdom in ethics and spirituality, and whether we turn to sacred scripture or poetry or prose or nature or science or personal experience, there is much to be revealed about ourselves and human nature and our larger world, and there is much that we will continue to uncover and to understand. I heard a minister say that we UUs turn to three places for revelation. The first is personal relationships with people we love, maybe even strangers, as Sam talked about, and with ourselves. So personal relations, understanding sort of this human interaction in our own psyche. The second one is in the natural world, and I'm surprised none of you brought that up, but many of us have spoken about having these moments of illumination when we're in nature. And the third is the arts. And I know that for me, the arts is like a language that is so beautiful and hits me in a different way in my heart and my mind and helps me open up and be aware of new things. At this point in time, it would be rare to find a Unitarian Universalist who sees one religious text as the total of religious truth. We know that there's no such thing as the sum of truth to be found everywhere, in one place, not even in the most vast library or collection of sacred text. We believe that as long as we're alive, there are always possibilities for new truths and insights, especially if you seek them out. So we are people who are constantly striving to make meaning of our lives in the world that we live in. There is so much richness in the world we live in. There's so much that UUs can learn without needing a divine messenger or message. This life and this world and what we experience when living it is full of sources that will guide us in becoming more human. As John Burens, the past UUA president, writes, revelation isn't sealed, it's lived anew in every heart. I have to say, I and maybe some of you do at times lament that we don't have a central text. We don't have weekly Bible study groups or an annual liturgical calendar that helps us return to passages annually throughout our lifetimes. There's something about that depth and that repetition that I find beautiful and I miss. But I think that for me, the gifts I have by living in a tradition that lacks that commonality, that doesn't have that kind of homogeneous theological perspective, is much richer for me and keeps my faith perspective alive. I think about just even what you guys shared this morning, to kind of witness to one another where you have received revelation or illumination or something that shifted something in you, that maybe pushed your journey into a new direction. There's just so many influence and sources that speak truth into our lives. So we are a constantly growing and evolving faith. And as you know, we're in the process of rewriting our sources and principles and other defining parts of Article 2, which is the part of the bylaws that has all of that. So this month, starting this week, you'll be asked to come online to sessions hosted by the Article 2 Commission just to hear more information and provide feedback about the clauses that I described earlier in our announcements. And as I said, this is big stuff. I'm like a serious cheerleader for this. These statements are going to be at the center of our faith and our movement going forward until about 15 years from now. That's when we look at them, is about every 15 years. We are a forward-minded, contemporary faith. We're committed to remaining responsive and relevant in the current age we are living in. As Jim Eller, a UU minister, says, we're not so concerned about where we are, but in what direction we are going. So Friday night of this week, I mentioned I was at the Turkish American Society of Minnesota, Tasman, they call themselves, the group that bought our old building. And as I shared this idea about Revelation not being sealed and how we use these common sources and principles as a shared guiding piece of our faith, they were absolutely fascinated. They were raising their hands and asking questions. And I have to say, they were literally gobstopped when I told them that we are rewriting our principles and our sources. The folks in the room with me are Muslim. They're people who practice Islam, which is one of their Arab, now I'm not going to be able to say it because of my Abrahamic faiths. There you go. And I hope to have some people from Tasman come and kind of preach on Sundays so they can teach us more about Tasman, their mission, and then their faith as well. Because right before I went there, they were having a prayer session. It's just sort of the building has been transformed into a different faith community. This month of November, with the theme of change, we'd be wise to heed the words of Octavia Butler. She says that all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. And for her, as a Christian, she adds, God is change. We live a faith of tradition and of change, of roots and of wings. We have a living faith, one that is continuously searching and open to discovery. Together and individually, we learn about love. We find ways to ground ourselves. We experiment with spiritual practices, and we create meaningful lives. Jim Eller said, the most profound form of worship is to learn something new. I love that. The most profound form of worship is to learn something new. So let me close with the words of Ted Reisenkopf, the one you heard earlier from in the reading. Once again, he's part of the Unitarian Universalist section of the webpage called Blue Boat, which is the shared voice of youth and young adult ministries in the Unitarian Universalist Association. He says, our faith, of course, does have requirements. To become a Unitarian Universalist, you don't make any doctrinal promises, but you are required to do much more. You're required to choose your own beliefs. You promise, that is, to use your reason and your experience and the dictates of your conscience to decide upon your own theology. And then you are asked to actually live by that theology. You are asked to take your chosen faith very seriously. In a real sense, he says, all theology is autobiography, is it not? Our experience, real and vicarious, is what informs our sense of reality. Our internal picture of the way the world works, what our values are, what we believe, what we know is true, that is our felt knowledge, not what is told to us to be true. In the final analysis, how can a person who wishes to live with integrity do anything other than this? So take your chosen faith seriously, but not so seriously that you can't be changed and impacted by joy and beauty, as well as by the lessons that are available throughout our days. I hope you all will think of stories of your own, like those that were shared this morning, and really just, return to what teaches you, return to your own experiences and things that have cracked you open. May it be so, and amen.